Hi, Anna. How are you?
Hi, Deb. I'm well. How are you?
I should have asked you if you pronounce your name Anna or Anna because I know it's both ways.
Anna.
It is Anna. Okay. Yeah.
And you pronounced my last name correctly, which is usually the
Okay.
one people stumble over.
Oh, yeah. So you listened to our Generations podcast this morning.
It was such a wonderful way to start my day. I just like put it on while making coffee and eating breakfast. And at first I was a little scared too, because it's like hearing people talk about your book when you're not in the room,
I imagine.
which is something I think we all kind of want to do and kind of don't want to do.
Mhm.
Uh, but I found it so moving, and just I just felt so honored that you two had read it and were talking about it, and that it brought up some things for both of you kind of outside of the text. And I just felt so much appreciation the whole time I was listening. So thank you so much.
Well, it's like I said, it's I'm tasked with finding the books that we read, although we didn't start as a bookish podcast, whereas reading is such a part of all of I have three daughters, lives, and Sophie and I in particular share a similar taste in books. And again, I'm not 100% sure where I stumbled upon this. Everyone out there joining us, we are talking today about The Long Answer by Anna Hogeland. Yes, this was the topic of our episode 7 on the Generations podcast. Sophie and I shared our thoughts today, and we had a lot of them. We had a great discussion. And when you find a book that prompts not just discussion about the text, but discussion about women and women's stories, and that's exactly what this did for us. So thank you for writing it, and for this will be an important book, I know, to a lot of women. So I think we'll start by asking you for a description. I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but if you were asked to describe the book, tell us a bit in your own words.
I always answer a little differently, so it's funny. It's like one of the hardest questions for me to answer, and it's probably the one I should have the best grasp on at this point. But um, I would describe it as a novel about paths toward motherhood and parenthood not going according to plan, and those journeys being interrupted, and expectations subverted, and new narratives coming in place of the ones that we thought we would be living. And to me, it's about pregnancy and mother becoming, and all of those things, and pregnancy loss, but also how those affect our relationships with particularly the women in our lives. Like, there's a sister relationship that's kind of the backbone throughout the book, and mother daughter, which I loved hearing mother and daughter speak earlier about, a book that there's a lot of like mother transmitting story to daughter in this novel, and female friendships as well. Just how this stage of life or these kinds of issues just bring up a lot of complicated relational territory with lots of people in our lives. And I was really fascinated by that. So that is what the book is about.
As you heard when we talked on the podcast, there was so what was interesting, and I think I kind of liked this, is that I listened to the book and Sophie read the book. Obviously, I have a copy for my shelves, but so when we were talking about, I had listened to another interview that you did, and you talked about this book being autofiction. And I had never heard that term before. I don't know if that's a term that like I missed somewhere, or that from your MFA work, but so give us a brief description of exactly what autofiction is, and how, like, where does it cross the line here and differ from memoir, because this is not a memoir per se,
It,
and yet you are Anna, and so I'll.
yeah. Autofiction, it probably is a term I learned in my MFA, but I think we all kind of feel it and know it, even if we don't know that word, like when we are reading something that feels very autobiographical. To me, I'm sure someone out there has a really sharp definition that I can't call to mind at the moment, but to me, it differs from autobiographical fiction in that there's a little bit of a meta component to it. So usually the protagonist shares the name and maybe some other biographical details with the writer. But there's also kind of a persona at play, and it's usually a writer persona, where an autobiographical novel, it might feel more like memoir, where like the book isn't being written. And there's very light kind of touches on like this book being written by the writer, maybe more towards the end. And then memoir, of course, is nonfiction. To the best of our abilities is nonfiction. So there's a real attempt, if you're a memoirist or nonfiction writer, to adhere to reality and your memory as closely as possible. And in any kind of fiction, auto or otherwise, of course, we don't have that allegiance. And I feel like my allegiances are shifty. So sometimes I do feel really, which means I always have to write fiction, because if you have shifty allegiances, you can write fiction. If you have shifty allegiances, you can't really write memoir. Allegiances to reality and my memory, that is. So I've said before that I feel like the Anna character, I could have changed I don't feel like I could have written a memoir. There were just too many fictionalized things that I was interested in that I wanted to play with. But
Right.
I did keep some parts that felt like reality, and some of them just were reality, closer to me, because I felt like it was so urgent to me while writing. And I was worried that if I started to put some fictional layers on the Anna character, even like small things like changing her name and other little things, I would lose some of that myself. And I also as a reader, I like autofiction because I feel really connected to the writer. And I wanted that. I wanted to connect with the reader, and I hoped that they would feel connected to me. And those are little devices that I hoped would help with that.
So in terms of a timeline, and without, talking about like spoilers and stuff like this is not really a book that would have those, but did you begin this did you start this and then what happened to your pregnancy happened? Is that how it evolved? And then you decided to include your story with these women's stories?
Yes. So there are a couple of ways to tell
Not
the
to get
story.
too personal if you don't.
Oh, no, I'm happy to. I open book, as whoever reads this book might guess.
Mhm.
I think it's important to think about just in terms of how a book is created, like how I'm always interested to hear, other writers answer this kind of question. I started the book when I was pregnant with my first pregnancy. Everything was going fine. I mean, it was medically, I was very anxious and nauseous and hopeful and thrilled and terrified and all the kind of normal chaos of pregnancy. And I started to write this novel about, it was already choral. It was already going to be kind of Anna gathering stories of other women who had
Oh, I
been
love
through.
that term, choral. I've not heard that.
Yeah, CHORL, like chorus.
Yeah.
Just because I think to only have one story feels already kind of risking being reductive or overgeneralizing. I feel like I had to be and I gather stories like that in life all the time, and some of them really stick with me and some of them not so much. And anyway, so I was already pretty outward looking for stories of how women had survived just normal, fine pregnancy, whatever that means. And then I lost my pregnancy at 5 months. It was a abortion after a diagnosis of a congenital heart defect. And I felt like the book had broken in my hands. Like the book I had set out to write just had this giant slash in it now of because the arc was supposed to be Anna gets pregnant and then she's, this full rainbow of 9 months.
What we think is going to happen.
Exactly. And even though I was anxious, because I'm just an anxious person, I had no kind of informed reason to believe that and all the tests were going well, you know. So I did come up with a structure before anything had happened to my pregnancy, but then it becomes a different book, you know, as the Anna, what happens to her arc of her pregnancy is quite interrupted, pretty violently. And but I wanted to now see that arc through. Like I still had an arc of a pregnancy. It just wasn't this shape anymore. It was like, you know, so it does still actually follow the timeline that I had thought originally around conception to now. Instead of birth, it was due date, you know, without a baby at the end. And then I guess a little bit more after that, but not much.
At the like a little bit of a segue here, but this is not is writing. Sophie had wondered, because it's not your only job, right? You're a psychotherapist?
It's funny because so my life has changed so much in the last couple of months that really whenever you ask me, I'll have a different answer. But today in this moment, I have closed my private practice actually. So I am now a writer, although I am definitely it's therapist or writer, but really it's mom. Like, especially because what I was saying to you earlier, we just got decent, consistent childcare. So it's really been 2 full years of just in the trenches with being mom all day. And so the therapist and the writer side of me have been like, you know, way neglected. The therapist side less so, because that was our income. So I kind of had to do that. But some shifts in our family have happened recently, and I was able to close my practice, which had been dwindling down anyway. And and then my daughter just got full-time daycare. So I feel like this week, you asking me, I can say like I'm a writer.
The world is coming together.
Yeah, I feel like I'm full-time. That's like my job now. And I'm trying to figure out how to move through my day with that, because you can always be writing more, but there's kind of only so much you can write in a day. And it's a place I never thought I would arrive. And I don't know how long I'll be in this place. Like when we have a new financial concern, I'll probably have to open my practice again, or if my husband's job doesn't work out, or whatever, any number of things.
Leave your options open, as they say.
Yeah, but I saw this window. We like crunched some numbers. We're like, I think I can do this for a bit and really treat it as my job, because it is also a source of income. Just, you know, being a literary writer is not, no one goes in that for the money, but in our capitalist world, I have to tell myself, that it is my job now.
Well, selfishly, I'm very happy, because I would love to see more about you, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But one of as you heard when we talked on the podcast today, one of the things that especially struck Sophie, and it struck me too, but that's why we're the Generations podcast, like what is her take on things in her late 20s, as you know, mine, generations later. And she, as you heard her say, she was kind of, it's like incredibly struck. It's like a slap with the way healthcare treated, you know, what you went through, all the women in the book, but your particular episode with the discovery of this birth defect and meeting with the doctor, and the way the dialogue. I do remember it so vividly as well. You wrote it so well, because we've all been, not exactly in your position, but in a doctor's office, hearing something awful, you know, and just how do you process it, and how, what do I want to say? I mean, it's their job. They're just going through the questions, but that women are just expected, I don't know how Sophie put it exactly, but just kind of expected to endure more pain. Women take, you know, less anesthesia with it, all of that stuff. And was that something that I thought that you wrote that scene, so you were so gracious as the patient. I felt like I remember that, like understanding the position the doctor was in, and yet you were in the worst pain of your life, emotionally, and then probably physically too. So how did that, like, how did you write that scene? And was that something that you set out to really want to nail?
I definitely wasn't thinking about it as consciously, in terms of the how healthcare treats women angle, although I definitely was writing about that. And I kind of realized, listening to your conversation, like, oh, I guess that is in the book, but it wasn't something I was thinking of. I didn't feel like I needed to be thinking about it consciously because it just was happening. And I feel like, well, so many thoughts are going through my head. One is just how well I was treated, actually,
Mhm.
compared to so many other women. I was a a white woman in a straight relationship, married with health insurance, I was in grad school at the time, English speaking. Like, I felt like if I was probably getting treated as well as anyone could imagine. And I do feel strongly that, like, those doctors are not, and you're not saying this either, but, like, they're not villains.
Mhm.
They're professional, and I had a lot of empathy for the residents, in particular, because they're nervous. Like, they're about my age, maybe younger. And I don't know how many patients they'd seen. I had been a social work intern. Like, I've done interviews like that before. Not that exact kind of interview, but very highly sensitive information interviews. It's scary, and I could feel her. I'm talking about real life now, not the
Oh
novel,
yes,
but
yes. No, I know. Yeah.
I could feel her anxiety, and I didn't feel like I
You
needed
did
to.
that so well. You wrote it so well. That's
Thank you. But I also was feeling, all my own stuff, and I I really wanted my OBs to like me. I think this is probably a natural thing, and this is so much more true with my third pregnancy, which was with my daughter, where I, saw that the entire arc of pregnancy and birth and postpartum. And I find myself just wanting to be the most liked patient, the easiest patient, the most compliant patient. And I want the pediatrician to like me because I want them to like my daughter and to treat her well. And because I also know that those things are real and they do affect your care, as
mm,
much that should not be the case. Like, that is the case. When I was and yeah, so much that is racialized and, lots of other things. But when I was a social work intern at a hospital, we called them the lovelies. Like, oh, there's a lovely family in room 3. Like, they're really nice. And I remember hearing the doctors saying that and knowing they're going to be treated better. And they're probably thought to be lovely because they have all these things that might be, like me again, like educated, white, blah, 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 blah.
well, I think we're taught that you get more flies with honey, and yes, I mean, you're going to get, I totally get what you're saying. And if you're a squeaky wheel,
Exactly.
we'll get annoyed with you.
And yet I really wanted to feel humanized in her eyes as well, and was, freaking out, like scared of pain and scared of all these things, and wanted to say all these things to her, that there's no space for in that room. And I mean, they're on a time schedule, we're running behind, and it's not her position, she's not my therapist, my friend. I just felt like slowing down time, really, because I was just anxious about what was happening.
Mhm.
And it's just so complicated, because I think that we should be self-advocating, and we want doctors to feel warm and like we're humans, but I also feel like they have those protections around them for a reason. Like, if they were feeling really what we were feeling, every patient they saw, I'm not sure I would want a doctor who was that porous or that absorbent. So it's a problem don't I don't envy that issue. Like my older sister is a doctor, my younger sister is a nurse, and they talk about that, like how to remain professional and have some guarding while also feeling warm and human. And it's a really difficult dance. And I actually felt like my doctors did it beautifully. There was one tech who was like my least favorite person for a little while, who was just really like insensitive, I found. But aside from that, I felt like these are really good people doing really difficult work,
Right.
really scary work for them. I mean, a lot of them had gotten death threats and things, and here they are like helping me and treating me like a human. And so I really, if any OBs or providers are listening, like, you are doing incredible, incredible work. And it's, I imagine, so hard on so many levels.
Our youngest daughter, so Sophie's younger sister, is a third-year medical student, and she just did her OB, her first rotation, so it's her year of rotation. She did her 6 weeks on OB, and so it's in Houston, so a lot of non-English speaking, and just her stories, not only with what is going on right now. I mean, it's Texas. It's just horrific. I can't even. That's like a whole nother podcast. But talking about, I can't even imagine. It's so hard for the doctors. The women you're in the trial of your life, and you can't communicate. And yeah, Hannah's like, it's crazy. So yeah,
this is maybe outside of the scope of what we're talking about, but I felt kind of what you and your daughter were talking about in terms of how women are treated in the medical system in a much more dramatic and acute and painful way while in labor. So I have a lot to say about that, another time, but like, I just felt it at a different time in my pregnancy, and a different pregnancy so acutely. Like, I couldn't believe how people were
upper lip and all
talking
that.
to me. What was that?
Stiff upper lip and all that. You don't, or you mean in terms of?
More just like completely ignored.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just like not like has become unhuman, and nothing makes you feel more unhuman than being dehumanized. Just like wanting to treat like an animal, really. Yeah. So I've definitely felt that, and I don't want anything that I just said to be construed as like this, minimizing that experience of feeling a cold response or feeling dehumanized as a woman in medical system is like very, very, very real.
Yeah. Well, one of the things Sophie and I also discussed, I shared with her the Lit Hub article that you wrote, and one of the things that you highlighted and have discussed is that you feel that we live, and paraphrasing you, in a grief denying culture. And I don't know if that's something that I'm sure that this experience bore that out. And I guess I wanted you to like speak a little bit more to that. And because that Sophie and I read that, and we just were like, she's absolutely right. And you might not think it until you go through something. But I know I've heard of mothers, parents who have lost older children say that as well. Like I said, nobody knows what to say, so they just like duck out of your life. And is that kind of where?
Yes, I should give credit to a professor of mine in the social work program at Smith, who I took a class on grief and dying, or bereavement, grief, dying, something like that. And she said something to that effect. And I was so young when I was a social work student. I was 22. I was right out of college. And I hadn't, I was fortunate to not have had experienced real grief. I've had loss and sadness, but not like real grief. And I found that to be intellectually true. Like, oh yeah, we do see a lot of death, a lot of depictions of death. Death has been we're so numbed to it. Like numbers of COVID deaths, numbers of whatever kind of natural disaster, video games, movies, on and on. But grief is hardly ever depicted in a way that I feel like is is true. And that sentence that that sentiment really, it's come back to me at different times in life. And it really came back to me when I was in what Emily Rapp Black calls the city of grief. Like, it really feels like another place, physical place that you go to. And it's odd who shows up and who flees. Like, I wonder if you found this, or I know that other people who have had real grief have expressed feeling this way as well. Like, some people you really think are going to be there distance themselves. Maybe they think that it's for your comfort, but it's really maybe more for their comfort, which is, I'm somewhat sympathetic to that. Like, it can be hard to be in the presence of someone who's like, really, really going through something. And yeah, you're so afraid to say the wrong thing, so you say nothing, which is the worst thing. But I also felt so heartened by these people who I would have thought of as random showing up really amazingly in my life. Like, an acquaintance would be the one to leave soup by my door, and my best friend I wouldn't be able to reach, or cousins, my mom, who was already out. She was not unexpected, but just so happened to have a loss very similar to my own. And I feel like that really strengthened our relationship.
That was a beautiful part of the book. I wasn't sure if that was
Yes,
also
yeah.
auto fiction. So that was part of your story too. It was so well done as well.
Thank you. That was it's funny, I've been asked about that section, like the taking turns of the mother and the daughter going through things at the same time, and
right.
How it came to that form. And I never have an answer, because it kind of just like, I can retroactively try to intellectualize why I was doing that, but it just felt like so necessary to me to have the mother's story, which has more of a long view, in the room with Anna, who's, time for her is, I think for that section, Anna's, it's maybe a half an hour. And the mom's story is, years and years and years. And
such a great parallel, if that's not the right word, but I
yeah, no, I think that's right. Or just like how much we need context for these things. So yeah, I think that we do deny grief, and I do think it is an American thing, not exclusively American thing. I just feel like we're probably particularly bad at it. Something about individualism, I'm sure, and kind of, Protestant ethic.
Yankee, like growing up in the Northeast, like, Yankee, don't talk about it. Don't be fine. Shove it under the rug.
Exactly. And so people who have been to the city of grief, I think, are there ready to hold you. And people who, I'm generalizing for sure, but I think that people who haven't it's kind of scary, to see somebody, I've been on both sides of it. I feel like, see somebody go through something really traumatic and not knowing
the intensity of that emotion we're uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
I think Joan Didion speaks to this a lot in The Year of Magical Thinking. I don't know if you've read that.
I have. It's been a while though.
But I feel like that is the best Bible for, if you're not, for like, maybe like I think in my review, I said for the non-religious, like, how do you grieve? And she went through that, losing husband and a daughter in like the same year. That book is just, I remember also being gutted by that, but I think she spoke to that. Like, we don't do this well. So I'm going to write about it.
With pregnancy loss in particular, I think there's just so little language around it. And it's something that's already in the air. And I've heard, actually, not many people said this to me, but I've heard like, oh, it's so common, as a real like go-to comment for people who have miscarriage. And it's not like it's untrue, but we never say that about any other kind of loss. Like, if you lost your mother, and I'll say, oh, that's really common. Even in
the podcast, I said, I've heard some, I had one friend in particular when we were all like, starting to have babies, who had a couple of, later miscarriages. And I remember we worked together and hearing the things people said. And of course they didn't mean, you know, when she would come back to work, but it was just like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, it is okay to, I do believe it's okay to say, I don't know what to say, but I'll sit, you know, I'll sit with you. But oof, it is a very, it's a particularly, um, it's a loss that people really find themselves running from, dodging.
Yeah. And
Can't
I
grab
wondered,
onto it.
yeah, I wondered how much of that is around people's own fear of it. Because unlike the death of a parent or a grandparent or something, it might not happen to you. You know, it
Right.
is more unexpected. It's against the course of what we think of as natural, even though, you know, loss is natural most of the time. But it's if you are, like, I know at least for some people in my life, people who were thinking about getting pregnant soon, like, you know, that's hard to be around someone who, and it's hard to me to be around too. So I felt like a lot of my relationships took a little hiatus during that point, and have come back or not come back in the same way. And that's okay. Part of that is also just life, you know, getting older and moving places. And with my sister, my older sister, who had, it was just so concentrated in our relationship at the time because she had a son who was healthy, and then I was pregnant, and then she had a miscarriage, and then I lost my son and she was pregnant again, and then I had a miscarriage, and then I had my baby. It was like such fraught. I mean, and we were trying to be there for each other, really trying to be supportive and loving, and it's just so much for both of us. And it was a time when I think we couldn't be as in each other's lives. And now we're both just moms. It's like all that stuff happened to us and it's still felt, but we can now watch our toddlers like running around and fighting with each other. And I feel like now we're much closer. So I've seen this with friends and sisters often, where like they're in the childbearing time, like they can be really joined if they're going on the same path at the same rate. It can be very containing to have somebody, a partner. And then when you veer paths in any way, it can be really painful for both people, no matter, you know, even if you're the one who didn't have the loss, like it, just holding your gratitude for your baby, but your care for your friend is just so complicated. I just like,
it is because I remember it so well in that stage of like, you know, everybody wants the same thing, everybody doesn't get the same thing. And you know, the moment when you're pregnant and you have a friend who's lost a pregnancy, and it's just, oh my gosh, it is one of the most, and that is why this book is so special, because you're like, as you said, again paraphrasing, I wrote the book I needed.
yeah.
Because there really aren't, I don't know, I mean, I've never read anything, like it. So well, I want to ask you in terms of, and what you just said before, that you finally have the time and daughters in some daycare, and are you, and I understand a lot of authors don't like to answer this or jinx it, but are you working on something in particular?
Yes, I'm almost done, I hope, with a new novel that is it's kind of about what happens next. So I mean, what most people would think of as the beginning of their motherhood story, what might be like the birth of their child. And for me, that felt like the end. Or like, oh, I got there. I made it. Finish line, healthy baby screaming in my arms. Like, this is just what I wanted. And it is. And it has just kicked my butt like every day, and is just, I think everyone's kind of unprepared because like, how can you be prepared? But just part of it is maybe the trauma and not being able to fully hold what having a baby would be like. Because I didn't really believe I would ever get there. And also just, yeah, crossing that threshold. And now feeling like a mom kind of without equivocation, where before I was like, well, I've been kind of in the world of mother, but then not. And it's just, there's no, again, no language for that.
Right.
And just early motherhood being so, the emotional complexities don't end, then the relational complexities don't end then. So it's a lot about that, like the early years, and trying to find some other people who might be going through something similar, especially in a rural area, which you're very familiar with. Anywhere in Vermont, but southern. We moved here, my husband and I moved here when my daughter was well, it's complicated, COVID story, but basically when she was 2 months old. And
Exactly what we did.
yeah, it's really, it's so wild. Just trying to find how other people have survived this time of life, kind of just like how I was looking to know how other people had survived a couple phases before time of
I can't wait to read that, because I was that mom. We moved, and we were just like plunked in this old dilapidated house and alone, and didn't know anybody. And my mother was, I mean, everybody, our family's in Boston. I mean, it wasn't like they were a world away, but when you have a newborn, they are a world away. And I felt so isolated, like you don't have a book club. There was no social, like I couldn't have like written book reviews on Instagram or anything. And I remember being it was very dark for a lot of it.
It's so hard to talk about, because I think the early motherhood stage, and this is another place in which I feel like we don't really have complete stories and adequate language around it, because I felt completely blindsided, like just
and they say you have everything you want. Why aren't you happy? Why are you crying?
I feel like it's either when you're pregnant, like the last thing you want to hear about is like, oh, newborn's like really tough, or being mom's really tough. You're just like, I'm trying to just like get through the day at this point. Like I can't even think about that. But then when it's swung the other way around, like, oh, it's just the most beautiful time in life, and it's just amazing. You're gonna love every second of it. Like that doesn't feel true. Then if you believe that, then you're kind of set up to feel, like what is happening right now.
Yeah. It's there's a lot thrown at us without any kind of, you didn't take a course in it. Nobody really told you what you were going to feel like, the hormones, your body, you're exhausted, but you're expected to be like at your best, and just it's not that easy. So
no, I mean, I feel like for almost anybody, it's not that easy. And it's also a lot about the decision of whether or not to have a second child. I feel like that's something that we have thought about so much, and we've kind of come to a decision not to. But I was like, where are people talking about this? Like, I feel like the decision is either to have kids, plural, or not to have kids. And I don't really see conversations. I mean, they're clearly happening, like, maybe in bed at night, but behind closed doors between a couple. But how do you decide whether or not to have another child, especially if it is? I mean, I hear so many mothers in particular saying like, oh my God, it's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. I'm so miserable. And then they're pregnant a couple of months later. And I'm always, there's something I'm not getting, like there's the words are here and the actions are here, and it's all true, but I feel like very confused often around decisions, like, and there's no bigger decision really than how many children to have.
I would have to agree with you. Yeah, life altering. Well, I always end my interviews with asking you to share some of the authors who have been your favorites, or who you love, or some books that you always recommend to people. It's like my favorite thing to find out. And you and I have talked a little bit about this via DM, but I would love to hear it. Everyone else would.
you cannot go wrong in my book. My two people I always cite as major inspirations, and I think everyone should read, are Elena Ferrante and Alice Munro. I just feel like they're so different, and yet they both speak to so many things that are unspoken and so beautiful. And the Brilliant Friend, or the Neapolitan Quartet, the Ferrante books, I just find craft-wise so helpful in terms of pacing. I mean, you just like can't put them down. And that was something I was really struggling with, was momentum. And so I turned to those books, and just pure pleasure. And more recently, I know you talked about Mother in the Dark as well. That's a recent book of mine that I really enjoyed. There's a short story collection that I mentioned to you on DM, but I'm gonna tell everyone who's listening now, that takes place in southern Vermont, called Prepare Her by Genevieve Plunkett.
I just ordered it from our bookstore.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, I went in and they ordered it for me.
It's beautiful. Even if you're not from this area or familiar with this area or have a special interest in this area, it's just a beautiful collection anyway. But it's that's a recent favorite of mine.
Well, Genevieve, it's Prepare Her by Genevieve. It's Genevieve Plunkett.
Genevieve Plunkett, yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that I could go on and on and on, but I will try to just stop there with the books.
I don't think readers ever, it's like you can't get enough of that. So that's great. Thank you. Well, we've had a lot of great discussion. Both you can hear Sophie and I talking about this on today it dropped, Generations podcast, and Sophie also did a little deep dive. Did you hear, into the cover?
Yes.
And that was really, I found that fascinating, because that's her career, is in art. And so this cover was also, the artist was the Paper Palace. And what did she say? The Vanishing Half?
She's done a lot. Yeah, she's brilliant. I think she has a background in math.
Is that right? Well, as soon as Sophie said that, and then we, I think, in our show notes, she put the article there, but or the website. She said this artist has a beautiful website, and it's too hard for people to see, but it's one of these covers that you look at it and it's just the beautiful colors, and then you look closer and you have the back of a woman, and you have a woman holding her abdomen with her hand, and it's just like it takes on a whole nother life. So yeah, we had fun. Beautiful covers are just like that, the icing on the cake, because you read it.
I was thrilled with that one.
Do you have anything to do with it? Did you get to?
No, they kind of send, I think if I hated it, then maybe there would be some back and forth and other options, but I saw it and I was like, great. I love it. Thank
you. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Anna, thank you so much for taking so much time and talking about an incredibly, poignant, there aren't words for what a beautiful work this is. I highly, highly, highly recommend you guys to go. I think any woman, at whatever, whether you're not going to have children, whether you're thinking of having children, if you've lost a child, there's something in here for you.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be on the show, and I just really appreciate everything that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, you have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. Okay. Stopped. Okay. Sometimes I hit end. I just by rote hit end, because Sophie and I do when we're recording, because we're always on Zoom, and I do that with my students, and I'm like, oh, the author's gone. I'm so sorry. But anyway, that went so well. I don't know. Did I take you to? Oh, it was a little longer, but.
Oh, you're fine. I don't know what time it is, but I don't have to pick up for a little bit, so this is the task of my day, and it's been a pleasure. So I really I get you as a writer, you get so few glimpses into how people are really receiving it, and it is a dream.
You're in a vacuum. You're a little bit in a vacuum.
Yeah. And it is really a dream of mine to have conversations that weren't being had, like maybe being had. And I think that's why